I was 17 years old when my parents decided I was no longer their daughter. The words didn't come as a scream, they came quietly, calmly, which somehow made them hurt more. One moment I was standing in our living room, still smelling dinner in the air, still believing I had a home. The next moment, my father pointed toward the door like I was a stranger who had overstayed her welcome. That was the night my childhood ended. My name is Alexandra, and this is the story America never sees, the part of the American dream that happens after the lights turn off. It was a Tuesday, ordinary, forgettable, the kind of day no one warns you about. I had just come home from school, my backpack slung over one shoulder, my phone buzzing with messages I didn't have the energy to answer. I remember thinking about homework, about dinner, about how tired I was. Normal things, safe things. I didn't know that by midnight I wouldn't have a bed. My parents were already sitting in the living room when I walked in. The TV was off. That alone made my stomach tighten. My father sat rigid on the couch, his hands folded like he was holding himself together. My mother stood near the window, arms crossed, staring outside as if she didn't want to see me. "Sit down," my father said. My heart started pounding. Parents always know before you're ready to tell them. They always do. I sat on the edge of the armchair, my knees bouncing, my fingers twisting together. The silence stretched so long it felt loud. "Alexandra," my mother finally said, still not looking at me. "We know." That was it. No explanation, no softness, just "we know." I swallowed hard. My mouth felt dry. I tried to speak, but the words tangled in my throat. When I finally found my voice, it came out small. "I was going to tell you." My father laughed, not amused, not angry, just disappointed. That sound cut deeper than yelling ever could. "Tell us what?" he asked, "after you ruined everything?" I tried to explain. I really did. I told them about the pressure, about the fear, about how I didn't plan for things to turn out this way. I told them I was still their daughter, still Alexandra, still 17, but they weren't listening. My father stood up slowly, like he was afraid sudden movement might break something fragile. His voice stayed calm, terrifyingly calm. "This is not how we raised you, and we will not be responsible for your choices." My mother finally turned toward me. Her eyes were cold, not angry, empty. "You made adult decisions. Now you can live like an adult." I felt the floor drop out from under me. "What does that mean?" I whispered. My father walked to the hallway, opened the closet, and pulled out an old backpack, the one I used in middle school. He tossed it at my feet. "You have 1 hour. Pack your things and leave." The room started spinning. "You can't be serious. I'm 17. I'm your daughter." My mother shook her head. "Not anymore if you keep dragging this family down." Those words branded themselves into my chest. I ran to my room, tears blurring my vision, my hands shaking as I shoved clothes into the bag. Shirts, jeans, a hoodie. I didn't know what to take because I didn't know where I was going. My bedroom looked like a museum of someone else's life. Trophies, photos, childhood memories that suddenly didn't belong to me anymore. I picked up a framed picture of me and my mom when I was little. I hesitated, then put it face down on the bed. I walked back into the living room when my hour was up. My backpack was heavy, my chest heavier. I waited. I hoped. I prayed someone would stop me. No one did. My father opened the door. The night air rushed in, cold and sharp. "Take care of yourself," he said, like he was talking to a distant relative. The door closed behind me, and just like that, I was homeless. That first night, I slept on my best friend's couch. Or at least I tried to. The room was dark, the air heavy with the sound of her family breathing behind closed doors. I stared at the ceiling, my backpack tucked under my arm like someone might steal it. Every few minutes, my chest tightened, and I had to remind myself to breathe. I kept replaying my parents' faces in my head. Not angry, not sad, just done. The next morning, I woke up before everyone else. I didn't want to explain. I didn't want pity. I quietly folded the blanket, slipped my shoes on, and stepped outside into the early morning chill. I still had school. That was the strangest part. The world didn't stop just because my life had fallen apart. Kids laughed in the hallways, teachers handed out assignments, bells rang, and there I was, homeless, pretending everything was fine. I didn't tell anyone. I smiled when people talked to me. I laughed at jokes. I kept my grades up because school was the only normal thing I had left. At night, I moved between couches, one friend, then another. I learned how to pack quickly, how to make myself invisible, how not to overstay my welcome. I told myself it was temporary, but days turned into weeks. I missed my parents more than I hated them. That was the part that hurt the most. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped and then sank when it wasn't them. One night, while lying on the floor of a friend's room, I finally broke down. I cried silently, pressing my face into a pillow so no one would hear me. I wasn't crying because I was homeless. I was crying because I felt unwanted. Still, somewhere deep inside me, a small voice whispered something dangerous and powerful. "You're still here." I didn't know it yet, but that voice was the beginning of my survival. By the third week, people stopped answering my messages the same way. It wasn't that they didn't care, it was that everyone had limits. Parents who asked questions, couches that weren't really mine, houses where I could feel myself becoming a problem. I learned to recognize the signs: shorter replies, awkward smiles, the phrase, "just for a few nights, okay?" I started rotating, 2 nights here, 1 night there, sometimes just a floor, sometimes the edge of a bed, always my backpack within reach. Every goodbye felt heavier than the last. I stopped unpacking completely. What was the point? Everything I owned fit into one bag now. I carried my life on my shoulders like proof that I didn't belong anywhere. One afternoon, a friend's mom pulled me aside in the kitchen. She spoke softly, kindly, which somehow made it worse. "Alexandra, you're welcome here tonight, but you should really talk to your parents." I nodded and thanked her, my throat tight. I didn't tell her that I had already tried. I didn't tell her that some doors, once closed, don't open again. That night, I slept in my friend's car. The seats were stiff, and the cold crept in through the windows. I curled up, hugging my knees, watching my breath fog the glass. I thought about how many times my parents had told me to always come home if things got hard. I wondered if they ever thought about me now. At school, teachers started noticing. I stayed late every day, pretending I needed help just so I wouldn't have to leave. The library became my safe place. Warm, quiet, no questions. I ate less, not because I wasn't hungry, because I didn't want to spend money. I told myself hunger was temporary. I told myself everything was temporary. But late at night, when I lay awake staring at unfamiliar ceilings, fear crept in. What if this doesn't end? What if this is my life now? One evening, after another uncomfortable goodbye, I sat alone on a park bench with my backpack beside me. The sky was dark, streetlights buzzing overhead. Families passed by, laughing, heading home. I had nowhere to go. For the first time since that night on the porch, I let myself feel angry. Not loud anger, quiet, burning anger. I was 17. I was still a kid. And yet, somehow, I was surviving something no one had prepared me for. I wiped my tears and stood up. "I won't disappear," I whispered to myself. "I won't." I didn't know how, but I knew I had to keep moving. School stopped being just a place to learn. It became my refuge. I arrived early and stayed late, sitting in empty classrooms long after the final bell rang. Teachers thought I was dedicated, responsible. They had no idea I was just trying to delay the moment I had to face the night. I showered in the locker room after gym class, grateful for hot water and privacy. I learned how to make myself look normal: clean clothes, tied hair, a practiced smile. No one suspected a thing. One day, my English teacher asked me to stay after class. My stomach tightened immediately. I was terrified of being found out, of being sent to a counselor, a social worker, someone who would call my parents. "You've been doing really well," she said, "but you look tired." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Just studying a lot." She studied me for a moment, like she could see through the lie, then simply said, "Take care of yourself, Alexandra." That kindness almost broke me. I started using the school cafeteria as my main source of food. I learned which days offered extra servings, which lunch ladies looked the other way when I asked quietly for seconds. At night, when I finally had a place to sleep, I lay awake thinking about the future. College felt impossible. Dreams felt dangerous, but giving up felt worse. I applied for a part-time job without telling anyone. When I got hired at a small diner, I cried in the bathroom, not from happiness, but from relief. My first paycheck wasn't much, but it meant independence, control, survival. I hid the money carefully. Every dollar felt like armor. One evening after work, I walked past my old neighborhood. My parents' house looked exactly the same. Lights on, curtains drawn, life continuing without me. I didn't knock. I realized something standing there in the dark. They had moved on. So would I. That night, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't beg, I wouldn't break. I would build a life so strong that no one could ever take my home away again. At 17, with nothing but a backpack and stubborn hope, I chose myself. And that choice would change everything. My life turned into a careful balancing act. School during the day, work in the evenings. Somewhere in between, I had to find a place to sleep, eat, and pretend I wasn't falling apart. Every day felt like walking a tightrope with no safety net. The diner became more than just a job. It was warmth, food, and sometimes the only place where I felt useful. The smell of coffee clung to my clothes, and the rhythm of orders and clinking plates kept my mind busy. When I was working, I didn't think about my parents. I didn't think about the house that no longer wanted me. I just worked. My manager, Linda, noticed my dedication. I never complained. I picked up extra shifts. I stayed late to clean. She once asked why I worked so hard. "I need the hours," I said. That was the truth, even if she didn't know all of it. At school, I stayed invisible. I didn't go to parties. I didn't hang out after class. I carried exhaustion in my bones, but I refused to let my grades slip. Education felt like my only way out, the only thing no one could take from me. Some nights, I slept in a small storage room behind the diner, with Linda's permission. It wasn't meant for people, but it was quiet and safe. I folded my jacket into a pillow and stared at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. It wasn't home, but it was shelter. I counted my money obsessively, saving every dollar. I skipped meals so I could afford bus fare. I learned how to stretch time, energy, and hope farther than I thought possible. Still, loneliness followed me everywhere. I watched other girls my age complain about curfews and chores, and I wanted to scream. They had no idea how lucky they were to have someone waiting for them at night. One evening, while wiping down a table, I caught my reflection in the mirror behind the counter. I looked older, harder, like someone who had learned things too soon. I didn't recognize the girl staring back, but I respected her. She was surviving. The phone call came on a Thursday. I was sitting in the school library, surrounded by textbooks, when my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in months. Home. My hands shook as I answered. "Alexandra," my mother's voice said, tight and unfamiliar, "we need to talk." All the air left my lungs. She told me my father had been telling people I ran away, that they were worried, that this wasn't how things were supposed to be. I listened in silence, every word reopening wounds I had worked so hard to close. "Where are you staying?" she asked. I didn't answer. "We never meant for things to go this far," she said. "You could come home, if you're willing to follow our rules." There it was. Not an apology, a condition. I thought about the cold nights, the hunger, the loneliness, the way I had built myself up from nothing. "I already have rules," I said quietly. "I survive." She sighed. "You're being dramatic." That word hit harder than the door ever did. "I was 17. I was scared. You locked me out." Silence. "I think it's best we don't talk for a while," she finally said. The line went dead. I sat there, shaking, tears sliding down my face in the middle of the quiet library. No one noticed. No one ever did. But something inside me shifted that day. I realized I wasn't waiting for them anymore. I wasn't living to earn my way back into their love. I was living for me. That night I worked a double shift. My feet hurt, my head ached, but my heart felt strangely light. I had faced the past and survived again, and I knew deep down that my future was going to be bigger than the people who tried to erase me. The opportunity didn't arrive dramatically. There was no announcement, no sign, no sudden miracle. It came quietly, like most real turning points do. One afternoon, my English teacher asked me to stay after class again. This time, her desk was covered in papers, and she looked unusually serious. "Alexandra," she said, folding her hands, "have you thought about college?" I almost laughed. College felt like a luxury reserved for kids with parents, money, and safety nets. I had none of those. "I can't afford it," I said, honestly. She nodded, like she already knew. "There are scholarships and programs for students in difficult situations." My chest tightened. Difficult situations? She didn't push. She didn't pry. She simply slid a pamphlet across the desk. "This is a state scholarship for students who've shown resilience," she said. "I think you qualify." That word again. Resilience. I took the pamphlet home and read it over and over, my hands trembling. Essays, recommendations, proof. Fear crept in alongside hope. What if I tried and failed? Still, I applied. I wrote about being kicked out, about sleeping on couches and floors, about learning how to survive quietly. I didn't soften the truth. I didn't dramatize it either. I just told it. Weeks passed. Life continued in survival mode. School, work, sleep, repeat. I almost forgot about the application until one afternoon, Linda ran into the diner holding my phone. "Your school called. Sounded important." My heart pounded all the way back to the library. When I opened the email, my hands started shaking. I had been accepted. Not just accepted, funded. I sat down on the floor between the bookshelves and cried. Not pretty crying, the kind that comes from holding everything in for too long. For the first time since I was 17, I could see a future that didn't involve just surviving. I was building something. College was terrifying, not because of the classes, but because I didn't belong to the world I was stepping into. Other students talked about dorm decorations and parents helping them move in. I moved my few belongings in alone. I worked 2 jobs while studying full-time. I barely slept, but I was proud. Every assignment felt like a brick in the life I was building. I stopped introducing myself as the girl who was kicked out. I became just Alexandra, a student, a worker, a woman with direction. I cut my parents out completely. It hurt less than constantly hoping for something they couldn't give. Years passed faster than I expected. I graduated with honors. I found a job, then another. Slowly, stability replaced chaos. One evening after work, I received a message from a number I hadn't saved, but recognized immediately. My father. "I heard you're doing well," the message said. "We're proud of you." I stared at the screen for a long time. Pride didn't erase abandonment. Success didn't rewrite the past. I didn't respond. Instead, I looked around my apartment, and smiled. I had heat, I had food, I had peace. I didn't need their approval to know my worth. I had already proven it to myself. I didn't plan on seeing my parents again. Life has a way of ignoring our plans. The call came from a number I almost didn't answer. When I heard my aunt's voice, tight with worry, I knew something had happened. "It's your father," she said. "He's sick." The words sat heavy in my chest. I told myself I didn't owe them anything. I told myself I had already survived the worst thing they could do to me. But late that night, lying in my bed, staring at the ceiling of the apartment I had built my life from, I realized something painful and honest. I wasn't going back for them. I was going back for me. Walking up to my parents' house felt surreal. The same porch, the same door, the same place where my childhood had ended years ago. My hand shook as I knocked. My mother opened the door. She looked older, smaller. Her eyes widened when she saw me, like she wasn't sure if I was real. "Alexandra," she whispered. I stepped inside, my heart racing. My father was sitting in the living room, thinner than I remembered. When he saw me, his eyes filled with something I couldn't name. Regret, maybe? Fear? Pride? "I never thought you'd come," he said quietly. "I didn't come to argue. I came to close something." We talked for hours. Not excuses, just truths. I told them what it was like to sleep in cars, to hide hunger, to survive alone at 17. My mother cried. My father listened in silence. "I didn't know," he said finally. "You didn't ask," I replied. There was no apology big enough to fix the past, but there was something else: understanding. When I left that night, I didn't feel angry. I felt free. Home used to mean a house with my parents' rules and expectations. Now, home means safety, choice, peace. I didn't move back in with them. I didn't suddenly become their daughter again in the way they wanted, but I didn't carry the weight of their rejection anymore. I carried myself. Today, I wake up in a life I built from nothing, a life that once felt impossible. I have a career, I have friends who feel like family. I have walls that protect me, not trap me. Sometimes I still think about that 17-year-old girl standing on the porch with a backpack and nowhere to go. I wish I could tell her this: you're going to survive. You're going to become strong in ways they can't imagine. And one day, you'll build a home no one can take from you. Being kicked out didn't destroy me. It created me. I am Alexandra, and this is my story.